Hello, everyone. This is Brian Kelly speaking, CEO and founder of CloudGenera. Thank you so much for your attendance today in CloudGenera's Q4 webinar, where we're going to cover SWOT analysis on the cloud service provider market. There are a good number of folks on the call today, so we're going to keep the mics muted until the Q&A session, but we'll make sure there's plenty of time to ask questions at the end of the presentation. To begin, here's our agenda. As many of you know, CloudGenera fashions itself as an agnostic provider of analytics in the market. And so today in this session, we're going to go through an unbiased view of the cloud service provider market, leaning on our learnings as an organization, serving countless partners and enterprises over the last year and analyzing hundreds of thousands of applications to understand their suitability for cloud, which clouds best serve the needs of the applications analyzed, as well as research done by our teams to better understand trends that are happening in the market. The SWOT analysis today is going to cover the top 6 cloud service providers by market share. So there's going to be a point of view shared on Amazon, Azure, Google, Alibaba, IBM, and Oracle. And then we'll close the session today with CloudGenera's point of view on the impact of inflation, rising interest rates, and looming recession on the cloud market. Definitely, we've seen in the last few months a change in behavior in the market, and it definitely impacts our point of view on growth and strategies for adoption of cloud in the coming year. To begin, let's start breaking down some of the analysis for each of the providers. And again, it's organized by market share. The order of the slides do not indicate a bias towards one provider or the other, but just the data, just the facts. To begin, let's chat about Amazon. So Amazon today is still the dominant player in the cloud service provider market with approximately 34% market share. That said, Amazon's market share hasn't grown in the last few years. They've been very consistent in capturing and retaining a third of the spend globally around use of cloud. What are their strengths? Well, from an internal perspective, Amazon still has the most mature offering in the market. They offer the most regions. They offer the most services in regions. They've been the most aggressive at moving beyond infrastructure as a service. Another thing that's a key strength for Amazon is their incumbency. As the early provider of infrastructure as a service offerings, they've built a very strong incumbency of clients that continue to build and buy in the Amazon environment. Now, in terms of weaknesses, from an internal perspective, one of Amazon's biggest challenges is the fact that other business lines compete with AWS customers. And we continue to see this as a reason why companies are looking for cloud service providers other than Amazon, specifically in healthcare, in grocery, to a lesser extent, financial services, where there's a lot of concern, but not a lot of direct competition. And absolutely any business that's doing commerce, you know, it's like anybody but Amazon is their approach. And so from an internal perspective, this is one of the challenges that they have, is that, you know, they are in so many different businesses that undoubtedly they're going to compete with some of their customers. Now let's chat about external factors. One of the great opportunities that Amazon has is around the partner ecosystem. Very similar to when VMware was rising and at its peak, and that was driven significantly by partners. We're seeing a very similar pattern around what's driving growth and usage of Amazon today. Today, they have the deepest partner network of any of the cloud service providers. And there are many examples of professional service companies, as well as software product companies, leveraging Amazon as their strategy for growth. And so this continues to be a reason why Amazon is kind of the de facto when people think of cloud service provider. It is so much about all of these people who are out there in the market evangelizing Amazon, having built offerings to get customers into Amazon and operate them while they're there. Now, threats. This is where we'll close out our commentary on Amazon. One of the big threats that faces Amazon today is how quickly their competitors have caught up to them in terms of capability. And what we're beginning to see, and we'll unpack it in the next few slides, is that these competitors are finding differentiation in the market. It's one of the ways they're going after market share and attempting to win business that either they're competing against Amazon to win or to capture those workloads that are already inside Amazon. And so those differentiated competitors are something that really is impacting Amazon's ability to grow at the rate that they've been growing historically. And then lastly, one of the threats that exists from an external perspective for Amazon is something that most of the cloud service providers are experiencing right now. It's this shift in mindset of businesses moving from growth at all costs to a much more disciplined view of how they're going to spend money on technology, with an eye towards how do they either remain profitable or achieve profitability. This is a significant shift in the mindset of the market. And this notion of growth at any cost, where it was more important to move fast than it was to have efficiency around your technology spend. This is a threat, again, not just to Amazon, but all of the cloud service providers in the market. Next, let's talk about Microsoft. Microsoft, in terms of strengths, they probably have the best positioning as an incumbent in this market. Microsoft, over the last several quarters, has gotten much better at leveraging their software incumbency. When we talk about software incumbency, there's Windows, there's SQL Server, there are their software applications like Dynamics, there are the acquisitions like LinkedIn, and then there's also the collaboration suite, which again is the de facto in the market. Microsoft has done a really good job of leveraging this software incumbency to become the fastest growing cloud service provider in the market. And one other item that we'll call out is the Power Platform. CloudGenera has seen firsthand with our clients that the Power Platform is a differentiator. It's a low-code solution that allows businesses to piggyback their Office 365 subscriptions to create business intelligence and website workflows that traditionally have been custom applications or third-party products. And so this Power Platform is one of the places where we see Microsoft really differentiating themselves in the market. And as organizations are, reducing their appetite for large development initiatives and new product launches, one of the ways Microsoft is gaining market share is by showing businesses a lower cost alternative to development. And that's delivered through this Power Platform. And so as organizations have adopted Office 365 en masse, the enterprise play will be to drive adoption and usage of the Power Platform. And again, we've seen this emerge in 2022 across many accounts. And it doesn't just drive consumption of Power and Office 365 subscriptions. There's a significant drag where it's pulling along Azure revenue as well. What are some internal weaknesses that are harmful from a Microsoft Azure perspective? One, complexity of licensing. Microsoft's done an excellent job of bringing together developer tools, bringing together apps, bringing together infrastructure, bringing together development frameworks, but the licensing is still very complex. And there are a lot of benefits that Microsoft can offer when you're an incumbent. However, the complexity is one of the things that continues to confuse customers. Complexity around how you license databases in the cloud, complexity around, if a developer has a Visual Studio license, what does that mean for the development environments that they're using in Azure? Complexity around virtual desktops. And to be clear, it's not that Microsoft doesn't have great capability and actually, in some cases, the best pricing, but it's the difficulty for customers to stitch together what they own, what they have under software assurance, and how that will transition into the cloud. That's an inhibitor. The other weakness that Microsoft has is its maturity of hybrid. And this is an area where we see moving forward proactive steps to make Azure Stack something that's equivalent in capability and usability to Azure itself. And so today, this is a weakness, but moving forward, this could actually be a strength as we look at some of the macro level headwinds that exist in technology spend emerging in the market right now. From an external perspective, what are Microsoft's opportunities? Microsoft is being very aggressive around the partner ecosystem. This is one of the key ways that they're going to gain market share from Amazon, and they're going to fend off the companies that are growing beneath them in the market. And it's our point of view that those who win the mind share of the partners are going to be the cloud service providers that grow in this next phase. Other opportunities for Microsoft, developer mind share. And a few years ago, building Microsoft code wasn't where the cool kids were. They were all building Java and then building Golang and, you name the development language du jour that people were focused on. We've seen a resurgence in the last year where Microsoft's actually a place to be now as a developer. And, with acquisitions like Git, Microsoft's really transforming the way they're viewed in the market from a developer perspective, right? What was a company previously viewed as proprietary and not friendly to open source, Microsoft has now fully embraced open source. And in some cases, quite surprising, they offer the lowest cost hosting for open source software solutions. Not in every case, but in many cases. A lot of folks wouldn't think that would be the case. You would think that their price advantage would only be around the Microsoft products that they own, but that's not actually the case. So that developer mindshare coupled with the partner ecosystem puts Microsoft in a really good position to continue to be the fastest growing cloud service provider in the market. Microsoft's threats, same as Amazon. It's this shift from growth to profit in mindset that's impacting organizations' motivations to migrate to cloud and making organizations think twice about the workloads that they're going to spin up and the costs associated with spinning up new workloads in the cloud. Third on the list, Google. So Google's a distant third behind Amazon and Microsoft in terms of market share, but that's actually not indicative of the maturity of Google's offering. They've probably come the longest in the last 12 to 18 months in terms of maturing their platform for use. And specifically, their maturity around cloud native tools is one of the key strengths that they have internally as an organization. Google remains the place where the cool kids want to build and operate software. And that's giving them an advantage in the areas of the market where new development is still happening. Another area where they have strength is the total cost of ownership for data-intensive applications. Google strategically has positioned themselves to not penalize companies for pulling data out of their cloud, right? So the fees for egress are not necessarily the same in Google as they are for some of the other providers. The other providers charge a little bit more. And Google has really gone after this niche of data and all of the ways you could analyze and store and manage data. So this is one of the areas where we're seeing them win consistently in the market based upon their internal capability. A weakness, and this has been a continued weakness for Google, the lack of enterprise focus inside the company. This is a company that's driven predominantly by consumer revenue. When you think about where Google makes its money, it's in search and advertising around search. It's in YouTube and advertising around YouTube. Those are the things that are driving the profits. Those are the things that are driving the lion's shares of the revenue. Now, make no mistake, Google over the last couple of years has really built a strong enterprise sales organization, and they have quality products. But still, the company, from CloudGenera's perspective, operates consumer first and enterprise second. It's not as bad as, the Google Cloud is the redheaded stepchild of Google products, but definitely, the business knows consumer much better than it knows the enterprise. And it shows in that they're really strong with the developers, the cool kids who want to build cool things in cool places, but they've lagged behind in the enterprise application migration space. And so that's, kind of a good segue transition to what are some of the external factors working for or against Google. Well, working for Google, we've already highlighted this, developer mindshare. It is the place predominantly where developers want to build new apps. Another area that's an opportunity for Google, of the big three, meaning Amazon, Azure, and Google, has been the most aggressive at their hybrid cloud partnerships. Work they're doing with, networking companies, work that they're doing with co-location companies. They have, with a purpose, tried to establish themselves as the cloud provider that will work best with your data center. And so, this is a space where Amazon with their Outposts and Microsoft with their Azure stack and Google with all of its partnerships, they're acknowledging and recognizing that the world will be hybrid. The world will be multi-cloud. And Google, for one, is not assuming that the data center is dead. They're smartly making the investments in partnerships and capabilities to monetize the reality of, a heterogeneous world when it comes to where you run your workloads. Threats for Google, they are a distant third in partners. They got a handful of really capable, really good partners. But as a general rule, the partner maturity is a big threat to Google's business. At a time when Microsoft and Amazon are aggressively recruiting and enabling and incentivizing partners, Google is attempting to do the same, but we're not yet seeing the uptake that we're seeing with the other CSPs. And so this is a threat. This is an area where Google definitely needs to focus, because the partner gives you scale. The partner gives you reach. And without the partner, the coolest products aren't going to be consumed in the market. And that's a proven thought process and one of the things Google needs to look after. And then again, same thing as the big three. This shift from growth at all costs to running an organization for profit is also a threat. Not a threat to the viability of Google or the other cloud service providers, but definitely a threat to their ability to show growth and to capture market share. Because there's going to be, we expect, smaller growth rates across the board in terms of migrations to cloud, modernization of applications. Most folks are going to be focusing on optimizing the spend where they are, as opposed to building new things, moving things, or modernizing old things. Now, Alibaba. So Alibaba comes in 2022 with 5% global market share. Their strengths, actually around technology. Alibaba has this technology called CEN. And what it is it's an inter-regional network. For most of the CSPs, at some point you exit their network, you traverse the public network to get to, your data center or to get to another cloud. Alibaba has invested in their own network. And in that way, organizations who have concerns about latency and performance across geographies, they see Alibaba as the best cloud service provider to address that. Another area where Alibaba is leading in the market is they're approaching AI and ML differently than the other cloud service providers. All the other cloud service providers are giving you toolkits and utilities to roll your own. Alibaba's come at it from a different perspective. They're building vertical solutions and horizontal solutions around AI and ML. And these things are offered turnkey to their customers. And so there's a time to value for common use cases around AI and ML, either in a vertical industry context or horizontally, where Alibaba is a clear winner in terms of capability and again, time to value. So those are a couple of the key strengths that Alibaba has from an internal standpoint. Weaknesses, this is still predominantly an Asia Pacific cloud service provider. It's where the majority of their regions exist, although they do have regions in Europe and they have regions in North America now. But the documentation is lacking for English-speaking folks, which is definitely a large part of North America and Europe. And that data center footprint outside of Asia Pacific also limits its ability to grow. But make no mistake, Alibaba is investing a lot of capital in taking this incumbency that they have in the China market and using that first to spread across Asia Pacific, then into EMEA, and ultimately into North America. From an external standpoint, their geopolitical alignment gives them a huge advantage in the China market. Amazon and Azure, while they do have capabilities in mainland China, it does not feel the same as the services that their customers are accustomed to around the globe. It's really challenging not just to get into the mainland China market, but to operate there. And so Alibaba definitely has a huge advantage when it comes to operating inside that market. Now, the threats, they have a lack of reach currently outside that market. And while they're making the investments in the other continents, it's not yet clear if the interregional network capability or the turnkey AI solutions are going to be things that will move the needle in other markets. But if they can tighten up their documentation, if they can build the regions and the value and the costs associated with that value make sense, while a lot of people dismiss Alibaba, our point of view at CloudGenera is you shouldn't, right? They are growing. They will continue to grow. They have the benefit of being able to operate at a different level in the China market than other cloud service providers. And that alone will give them a sizable chunk of market share for the foreseeable future. Next, IBM Cloud. So IBM is the only one of the 6 main CSPs that actually has declining market share, which is a little bit surprising, quite frankly, because from an internal standpoint, IBM has huge strengths when it comes to incumbency, both software, think the Red Hat portfolio as an example, and hardware. Think mainframe, think mid-range like the P series, think the AIX operating system, think the WebSphere product line from a software standpoint. IBM has a huge incumbency, both in the data center and in the cloud. The weakness, however, is that they've lacked consistency in both their strategy and their branding. All right, for anybody who's been following IBM Cloud was SoftLayer, it was Bluemix. The brand itself has changed 2 or 3 times as they've acquired different companies. Now they've acquired yet again another entity in Taos, a managed service provider that they're leveraging alongside of IBM Cloud. But as they call it internally, their program synergy to integrate IBM and Red Hat portfolios has not yet resulted in a strategy that's clear to the market. And that's one of the main reasons why we see, the market share actually declining for IBM right now. It's something that we think they can recover. I mean, of course, they're IBM. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. But it will require them to address these weaknesses if they're going to get back on a growth trajectory. Some of their opportunities, you're probably sensing a theme on CloudGenera's point of view on partners. IBM has a vast partner network, independent software vendors in particular, that could drive growth for IBM. But unfortunately for IBM, they don't have mind share of the developer, and they're suffering from the same pain point that other other cloud service providers are experiencing, which again is that shift from growth to profit as the driver. But that threat also puts IBM in a good position as the incumbent, right? If they can find ways with their cloud to better monetize the mainframe workloads and the mid-range workloads, they are in a really good position to be able to get back on a growth trajectory. And that brings us to the sixth cloud service provider that we're covering today, Oracle. So Oracle, 2% market share today. Oracle's made a lot of investments in cloud in the last year, making their offering more robust and expanding the offering into other regions. One of their key strengths internally is their software incumbency. They have the apps, right? So if you think the legacy ERP, the legacy CRM, legacy HR services, right? They've got a great portfolio of applications that give them a critical mass, a foundation to build cloud revenue off of. They also have application infrastructure, right? There's still a lot of web-based applications built on Java and built on Oracle's version of Java. And let us not forget their database, right? While Amazon and Microsoft and Alibaba as examples, Oracle as examples are aggressively going after Oracle database workloads, it is still the best-in-class database for relational data stores in the market. Another strength they have is they are actually very price competitive around the costs for their platform, both from an IaaS and a platform as a service perspective, where they definitely have an advantage to control the licensing when they are the incumbent. And so these are some of Oracle's key strengths. Some of their weaknesses: they lack a clear strategy, product strategy. As an organization, they've not yet figured out what Microsoft is figuring out, which is how to take your apps and how to take your other software, your application infrastructure software, and use that to drive growth. This is something that right now is a weakness for Oracle. It's something that they can address. The other issue for Oracle is a lack of product innovation. Oracle's offering feels like a managed VMware cloud. Oracle's portfolio of software has become more about acquisitions as opposed to, new product introduction. And so these are some of the things that are currently weaknesses inside that organization from CloudGenera's point of view. What are their opportunities? Well, externally, Oracle does have a great perception in terms of the quality of their products. And specifically in markets like EMEA, where those markets in the Middle East, in particular in EMEA, they really favor and value the best. And so even if you have to pay a little bit more, you want the best. And so in that market in particular, we're actually seeing Oracle doing the best of all of the 6 cloud service providers, as they take that incumbency of software and they build this revenue around infrastructure and platform as a service as a cloud service provider around it. Their threats, well, one of the big threats is developer mindshare. There was a time, in the Sun Microsystems, the BEA systems of the world, they had really strong developer communities that were very loyal to the brand. And while those people still exist, their numbers are dwindling. The shift from Java to Golang, as an example, has really moved people away from the Oracle way of doing things. And that's one of the areas, again, if they can tighten up the innovation, if they can come with a clearer product strategy, they can begin to win the mind share of these developers again. But right now, it's definitely a threat to their business. The other threat to their business is the perception of high cost and unfavorable licensing practices. This is interesting because our data shows that they're actually quite cost competitive in the market. But for years, Oracle, as an organization, decided to fight VMware as a technology, and that really hurt their brand in the data center. They also, have practices that make it punitive if you're trying to move Oracle licenses around. And this has left a bad taste in the consumer's mouth. And it's one of the things that we see as a threat, and one of the things we know in our own collaboration with Oracle, they're taking very seriously, and they're working very hard to repair the perception of their brand. Okay, now that we've gone through each of the cloud service providers individually, next we're going to take a look at a visualization of where they sit in the market, who's leading and who's challenging. And this is not built just based upon market share, although market share has an influence. Here's CloudGenera's point of view on the market as a whole. And again, this is driven by our research team. It's driven by the output of our platform and the anonymized data that we are able to see across the market, all the different industries, all the different types of applications. So challengers, well, IBM, Alibaba, and Oracle, we would put in the camp of challengers. And as we've discussed before, right, Alibaba is growing, mainly because of the stranglehold that they have on the China market and the great work that they're doing to expand into other areas of Asia Pacific. So as long as that Asia Pacific economy keeps growing, we expect Alibaba will continue to emerge from a challenger into a leader. Oracle, we also see Oracle growing, right? If they can continue to make inroads to repair that brand, their price for performance, their software incumbency puts them in a position to really become a leader in the market after many years of trying to figure out how to launch and be relevant as a CSP. IBM, again, is the one that probably has the most work to do as a challenger. But if they can figure out how to leverage that hardware and software incumbency, if they can develop a clear strategy to bring together the Red Hat and the IBM brands, we could see IBM quickly turning around and gaining market share yet again. Now, as we move to the right, to the leaders, Google, we do have them a little bit below our friends at Amazon and Microsoft. And while they are gaining market share, they really need to capture more enterprise workloads. And so Kieran is, I know, going to have his sales team and his organization laser focused on winning migrations of enterprise apps, but they're 24 to 36 months behind Amazon and Microsoft in this endeavor. And so, balancing the need for enterprise workloads with the opportunity to continue to innovate so they can win new apps is going to be key to their continued growth. Now, Amazon, they're moving sideways in terms of market share. They are the dominant player, but for them to grow in this next phase, they're really going to need to fix this notion that the brand competes. Right? You don't want to be viewed as the company that works against your customer. And that's going to be one of the things that Amazon's going to have to figure out. And of course, there's been rumors on and off for years that they might spin the Amazon Web Services business out. But right now, that would be just a really hard thing to do with the amount of profit that's being generated by that business. Right? A lot of Amazon's businesses run at low margin, but AWS is the exception. I think at last reporting, it was 30% net margin operating this business. That also speaks to, as customers look to lower their bills and they stay more focused on the cost of tech, a high profit margin like that typically indicates that, that there's a delta between what they're charging for convenience versus what a lower cost option might be that's available in the market. Now, Microsoft, from CloudGenera's perspective, this is the provider that has the most momentum right now. That software incumbency, even though they have issues around the complexity of licensing, is giving them a lot of leverage. That Power Platform is helping them capture workloads, both the new apps that are being built and the replacements of web apps that can be managed with a lot less effort and a lot lower cost by moving to the Power Platform. And as long as they continue to invest in growing that partner ecosystem, we can see them continuing to be a dominant player and the fastest grower and capturer of market share in the market moving forward. Now, you'll notice on the slide, there's a seventh box. While we've been focusing predominantly today on the big 6 cloud service providers by market share, we'd be remiss in our SWOT analysis if we didn't highlight a trend that we see emerging in the market right now. The trend that we're seeing is a resurgence in interest in co-location and managed service providers as alternatives to the hyperscalers. As businesses are shifting from growth at all costs to we need to be profitable or we need to protect our profit, cost is becoming a larger part of the decision making. Businesses are looking at the expense that they've incurred to lift and shift to the cloud. And many of them are identifying that the agility, the benefits that they get in cloud are not offsetting the increased costs. For many customers who've lifted and shifted, it's 2 times the total cost of ownership of running that workload in a VM-based or a container-based environment on-prem. And so what we're seeing both for people who are thinking about migrations and people who are already in the cloud is they're looking at alternatives to those hyperscalers. They're doing it because they see lower TCO. They're doing it because they have flexibility to do OpEx and CapEx, right? OpEx being like Dell Apex or HPE GreenLake. CapEx being you buy the hardware, you depreciate the hardware, but you run it in somebody else's facility. So these organizations are the ones that are capitalizing on the focus of profit versus growth, right? That shift that's happening broader in the market. Now, we're going to close with one last slide talking about the impact of the economy on the cloud service provider market. And then we'll open it up for the audience to ask any questions about the content here or other things you might be curious about and that CloudGenera might be helpful in answering. And so as we wrap, inflation, rising interest rates, looming recessions around the globe, that's changing the way people are moving to the cloud. And you've heard it multiple times in this presentation, the pursuit of growth at any cost has shifted to a mandate to reduce costs and ensure profitability. And the federal government actually is a great indicator of how people are growing up and thinking differently about cloud. What used to be cloud first as the US government strategy has now been rebranded cloud smart. People are no longer being rewarded. Organizations are no longer being rewarded by moving workloads from their current state into hyperscalers for no business justification. People are actually being penalized now for having overruns on their budgets and their bills. They're struggling with budgeting and forecasting and trying to get a handle on, these cloud bills that have gotten out of control. And that's why we think going forward into 2023, growth rates across all the major public cloud providers are probably going to decline. We also believe that the number of initiatives to build new apps, to launch new products, a lot of those are going to be shelved or deferred until we start to see global economies improve. And that is why, again, we highlighted co-location as something that needs to be paid attention to in the market, for your customers or for your organization, because cost now is king. And finding ways to control costs, finding ways to eliminate costs, those are outweighing the interest to move faster, to build more, right? Growth without profit is no longer hip, right? It's back to the business of you actually have to have balanced books. You actually have to have a balance sheet that's not littered with debt, and you got to run for profit, right? You can't be a venture masquerading as a business any longer. And so this is, again, one of the big trends that we're seeing exiting 2022 and entering into 2023. People are really focused on trying to figure out how to get their existing cloud workloads in a lower cost model. And they're seriously considering alternatives to public cloud. And that may even be do nothing, right? Just stay where you are. And in some cases, the CFO is incentivized for that, right? In this inflationary market, being able to capitalize your technology is an asset. And you can't do that if it's OpEx spend in a hyperscaler. All right, with that, let's open up the floor for some questions. And you can fire them either in the chat, or we can unmute folks' mics now and feel free to fire away.
Hey, this is Mike. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mike. Hi.
Great. Great webinar. I really appreciate the insight, kind of just take away a lot of the marketing and just state the facts. So I really appreciate that. You mentioned hybrid earlier on in the presentation and noted it as one of Microsoft's weaknesses. And I'm just curious, kind of in general, as we look towards customers that realize that workloads need to be more hybrid, more closer to where the data is, what kind of adoption are you seeing there? I can't say that I'm hearing Outpost is on fire from an option. So I can't imagine Azure Stack is too far behind. And I'm just curious, like, especially how does that play into your model when customers are doing the assessments and the reporting, and how does hybrid and taking cloud environments and putting them on premise factor into what you're seeing happening and kind of what you're doing as a company?
Yeah. Oh, excellent question. Actually, layered question there. So let me start to unpack it. First, what we see predominantly in hybrid, a lot of it is being driven by the continued evolution of the data center. So HCI, hyperconverged infrastructure, has significantly reduced the total cost of ownership, especially around labor and the services to integrate different, networking and storage and compute components. So at its foundation, that HCI layer, right, that you're getting from an HPE or you're getting from a Dell, is one of the kind of key critical success factors of, how is this economically more advantageous than paying a premium for kind of self-serve capacity consumption provided by the hyperscalers. The next level up, where VMware is the incumbent, that's where we're seeing a lot of, running VMware on-prem and then connecting to, native services in one of the cloud service providers. Then the emerging trend is containerization, where if you configure your apps correctly, if you design your apps correctly to leverage containers, well, then you have portability without having to worry about swapping out hypervisor and management stack between the cloud and the data center. And so adoption of Kubernetes and all of its variants and flavors is another kind of trend that we're seeing that's enabling more hybrid cloud types of models. I would say right behind those, kind of like start with VMware, then look at Kubernetes is something that's emerging. Right behind that's Azure Stack. And when I say it's a weakness that could turn into a strength. But much like Microsoft experienced with VMware, right? They didn't really get Hyper-V to be industrialized, right? To be at the same quality and performance that you got out of VMware. And so Azure Stack, in our mind, is really the continued evolution of what started with Hyper-V. And make no mistake, Microsoft's gotten better. And we've heard for 2 or 3 clients recently who were just full speed ahead on moves to Azure, that they're going to adopt Azure Stack as an alternative. And it's going to allow them to reduce their software costs because they won't need to renew their VMware. And they're feeling like the solution is good enough to support their enterprise workloads. If and when we see more organizations adopting that model successfully, we think that weakness actually becomes a strength for Microsoft. Whereas today, it's an offer, but it's not the same experience. And so, that weakness actually could become a strength again over time. Did I answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, it was very helpful. And I think part of it is, as they continue to develop the Azure Stack portfolio, right, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So I think it will be interesting to see how that develops. So no, I just trying to get an understanding of, where we see customers adopting those cloud platforms on premise versus abstracting a little bit more, and kind of like you said, with going Kubernetes and for the verticals that aren't really aligned well to Kubernetes type stacks, I guess we'll see a slow progression towards those types of things. So it's very helpful. Yep. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, let's we got a couple of questions here in the chat. So for Alibaba, is the association with the Chinese government either real or perceived an issue for them? Right now, we don't really see it as an issue, right? We see it as a clear strength. Now, when we get into other markets, Will organizations be hesitant to put their workloads in Alibaba? Right now, I think cloud service providers could use that fear, uncertainty, and doubt as a tactic to compete. But if Alibaba is going to operate in a way where they're going to get workloads in those markets, they're going to have to adhere to data sovereignty. They're going to have to adhere to data privacy. They're going to have to operate with SOC 2 type 2 controls and process. And in that way, you know, the concerns about them being too close to the Chinese government will probably be relieved. But again, it's going to require them to be completely open, like every other service provider has to be open to be able to win those workloads. All right, next question. What do we see as the impact of 5G and edge services in cloud business models? So it's interesting. We've seen a number of IoT and edge use cases over the last few years. And unlike a lot of the work that we've done in big data, which we've seen a lot of organizations do things that are academic around big data, edge computing and IoT as a use case, we are seeing is a real macro level trend that is going to influence cloud. Not in kind of like the far out, next gen of, World Wide Web way that people are talking about with decentralized computing and this move away from central compute, but more like the real business cases, like your Duke Energy, and you have thousands of substations and you have components that fail there. And if you can pull that data from the edge and analyze it in the cloud, you can better predict where you need to send your service crews and when you need to send them so that they don't have outages. The explosion of data that's going to be generated at the edge is going to create a lot of opportunity for cloud and for data center. In fact, we won't speak to the specific electrical utility, but one of our customers has leveraged the CloudGenera platform to figure out how to model and prototype these edge-based applications in the cloud so that they can get quick kind of proof of viability of their concepts. But then when they move to production, they're repatriating that workload back into the data center for two reasons. One, CloudGenera's analytics predicted that the networking costs were going to be out of control as they, did their analysis in the cloud and then had a bunch of client workstations connecting to do BI and reporting and pulling a bunch of data down. And then the second, for electrical utility, they love to capitalize stuff. So the idea that they could model an edge use case in the cloud and then bring back to the data center that component of the architecture that consolidates the data from the edge. There's a great use case for the CloudGenera platform and proof that new apps will be built around the edge and the emergence of the edge as something that's important. All right, next question. Let's see. I think that's all the questions right now in the chat. We will provide access to anyone who would like the presentation material. Just reach out to myself or someone else on the CloudGenera team, and we'll be happy to share that with you. And we got 8 minutes left, so if there are more questions from the audience, feel free to fire away.
Brian, it's Andrew Hunt. Can I ask a question around capital versus OpEx? Because your
Sure,
example
Andrew.
of Duke Energy is a good business case. If there's a more relaxation of capital rules, right, under general accounting, which says that the cloud services consumed the way they are could still be capitalized through subscription models and things like that, do you see some of this slide away from the capital of the growth in the cloud changing, or do you think it's what you've predicted here is going to happen regardless of the capital versus OpEx decisions?
I do believe that if general accepted accounting practices evolve to allow you to capitalize something like a reserved instance or committed use as an asset that has a time to live, and then its value is gone at the end of that time, that will help the cloud service providers, all of them, in capturing more workloads. And it's not just industries like electrical utilities and government that in all cycles prefer CapEx. It would be the broader market. right? Because CFOs right now are going to be pressing to capitalize more and more to get that financial benefit. So if we could see the shift in the accounting practice in a way that would allow you to capitalize cloud, that would be very favorable for growth rates. Now, you're still going to have to deal with total cost of ownership and the unit costs of what does it cost to run the application in cloud versus in colo. Like that's still going to be a real conversation, a real thing, especially for legacy apps, right? The cloud native apps, their costs are different, right? But if you're moving legacy apps into the cloud, you know, people will still have to deal with that. But as a general rule, if you were able to capitalize your reserved and your committed use capacities, there would be, I think, a good catalyst for more workloads to move to the cloud in this climate.
A sort of a follow-on, do you see the cloud providers potentially extending the concept of reserved instances or reserved capacity outside of the traditional IaaS into things like containers, PaaS, and even potentially SaaS?
I do believe so, yes.
Okay.
I believe so. You know, it will depend on the service, but the value to the service provider in the multi-year contract is predictability of the revenue and locking in that customer from a competitor. And
right,
so,
and the value to the customer is that they could potentially capitalize that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think they are related, Andrew. Like right now, it's a give to get, right? You want a lower price, you have to commit to run your infrastructure here longer. If the accounting rules shift, then there's another driver to open up reserved and committed use above and beyond IaaS. You know, right now you see it a little bit in platform as a service, right? Some of the cloud service providers will allow you to do multi-year commits on platform as a service. Other providers say no, like you can only be in an on-demand pay-as-you-go model for that platform as a service. So we're already starting to see the reserved or committed use licensing option move up the stack beyond IaaS. But again, back to your original question, if people could capitalize that thing, I think you'd see a lot more CSP offerings that have multi-year options to enable those finance folks to get the accounting benefit.
Agreed. Thank you.
All right, team, we've got opportunity for one or two more questions. If anyone has something pressing, and then of course, if you didn't have an opportunity or didn't feel comfortable in the forum today to ask the question, you can always reach out to us here at CloudGenera.
Well, this is John Sheck. I'll throw out a comment. You mentioned how with Google, one of their weaknesses may be not such a strong focus on enterprise. Yet I see Google doing one thing that I don't see the other providers doing, which is offering these double run scenarios where they'll set up applications running both on the cloud and on the client's servers at the same time to help with the testing. And our experience is that these cloud migration projects, a lot of times 60–70% of the effort is in testing. And these dual run scenarios are really helpful for clients to do the testing. So first I was wondering, does thinking about that improve your, the way you think about Google's strength as a enterprise server? Or also, do you see any of the other hyperscalers doing that kind of a dual run or double run scenario?
Yeah, so first, John, thank you so much for the commentary, the feedback, and the question, and give me an opportunity to clarify some of my points if they were confusing. When we say one of Google's strengths was hybrid cloud, dual run is an element, an aspect of that, right? That ability to test on-prem before running in the cloud, that's just one of many things Google's doing to build a bridge, to build a bond between data center and cloud, even if the intent in that particular use case is to move to cloud. So when we talked about opportunities in the external market, right, that focus that they have around hybrid cloud, and I mean, you hit on something really, really important there. We were working with a media and entertainment company out west. They're one of the TV channels, right, that's become a streamer. Used to be part of your bundled cable package. They might do zombie shit. I don't know. I'm not saying who it is. And they also might not be doing zombie content. And they started racking up $100,000 a month to test their SAP in the cloud before they moved it to the cloud. Something like that dual run capability from Google could have significantly reduced that CIO's expense. So like we see great value in that, and that's why we think that's a huge opportunity for Google. All these utilities, not just the ones that prep the migration, but ones that can also support long-running use of hybrid cloud. We think Google is definitely making the investments. Now, a point of clarification on my prior comments. We think Google is very serious about the enterprise inside of the Google Cloud business unit. The challenge is that the lion's share of the organization is so oriented and focused on consumer that it's a shift in mindset for the broader organization. They don't have a lot of synergies outside of the Google Cloud group, but we know they want those enterprise workloads. And a further point of clarification, when we think about Google and adopting the enterprise workload, we're thinking about the commercial off-the-shelf application. We're thinking about the enterprise app, like an ERP, like SAP in my example. Those are the things that Google really needs to capture now. And if things like dual run help them win those apps, we think that's a brilliant strategy. But hopefully that gives you some clarity on our thought process there, both on how something like dual run fits into our view of Google really embracing the integration between data center and cloud. And also that it's not that they're not focused on enterprise, it's that, they've got a big hill to climb and a culture to change to win over the buyer, the enterprise buyer, to get those legacy workloads in the Google Cloud. Okay, with that, we're right at 1 o'clock, team. So I'm going to share one last slide as we wrap for the day. And thanks again for everybody's participation. If you're interested in cost planning or FinOps tools, one of the things you can do to be proactive around understanding how these providers compare and their total cost of ownership is to go to governance.cloudgenera.com. There you can navigate through a free demo of CloudGenera's capabilities. It's organized by use case and workloads, and you can generate scorecards to compare different providers. And then there's also a free trial to our cost planner product, where if you choose to sign up for a no-cost 2-week trial, you can begin to model different applications and compare them across different cloud providers. So again, no pressure to leverage CloudGenera's product, right? Today was all about information sharing and our point of view on the cloud service providers, strengths, some of the trends that are happening in the market as we go into 2023. But again, we are a product company and we provide some great tools for the FinOps professional, and would love to offer it up to our audience today to try some of them out for free. And with that, thank you so much for attending today. We'll wrap the webinar. And again, the recording will be posted on our website, and we'll notify people on LinkedIn when it's ready. And for anybody who did want a copy of the PowerPoint, feel free to reach out to us and we'll get you a copy. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day all.